Going back to my first experience of going into care, it was such a traumatic time, being ripped away from my family. My first night in care, I just cried myself to sleep. It was horrible, and I didn't know what to do, what to expect. You have to think, some of the staff that work in these places, they go into these jobs because they want to have an impact and help children like I was then. But, in all these care homes and observation assessment centres and places where they put naughty children, they were short-lived. I spent a very short time there. It didn't give them enough time to help me in the way I needed help. And so I was passed around, I moved, moved from one care home to another, and the staff there just didn't have enough time to help. There was one person who was a friend of mine who was in one particular place. He was in my first children's home, and it was an assessment centre. He was there a long time. The staff there too, a married couple who worked there, they adopted him legally, and they were able to have a positive impact on his life. And I saw him at different stages in my life. He was working and doing relatively well. It just goes to show, if you have got a long time in some of these places, the impact that positive men and women can have on that child. I have learnt from some of the mistakes of going into these places for a short time and, not trying to take anything away from the staff. They have said some good things to me, and tried to help me, but it hasn't been enough. I saw the same thing in prison. When I've been in prison for a short time, any staff that, is there because they want to make a difference, they want to help people, well, they just don't have enough time to spend with that individual. And so, anything positive they say, it goes in one ear and comes out the other. And it's so important that you don't put hardened criminals with vulnerable criminals because of the influences. I learned to be a drug dealer in prison. I was taught about other jobs. It was like, going to the job centre sometimes, other criminals will tell you about jobs that you could do. I was taught to go to some of these post offices in the country area, and the post office door has got its letterbox on the floor, and the postman puts the letters in, and you can put your hand through and take them out. You learn lots of things. Committing burglaries, wait until it's raining and windy, because nobody looks out their window because it's raining and windy, and they will hear noise, so you can smash security lights. All these types of things I learned that in prison. So it's not good to put these knowledgeable and hardened criminals with vulnerable ones, because they're going to teach them bad stuff. You put in a good apple with a bad apple, it's going to become bad. It's out of control in some prisons because people are bringing in more drugs, they're bringing in mobile phones, and they're continuing their crimes from behind bars because they have access to social media, Snapchat and various other sites. And so prisons in the UK, they know that they have the power, that it's in their rules, standing orders it's called, that you can put the prison on good order and discipline. Closed visits, nothing gets in, nothing gets out. You speak to your visitor through holes in the glass or a telephone. It's not happening. They're creating more chaos by not applying their own rules. What worked for me was that I went to a school called St Edward's, and I was there 4 years. What worked was that there were men and women that were called house masters and house mothers, and they had enough time to unpick some of the damage that I had accumulated through my early life. And I found that a great help. Men and women who loved you, they encouraged you, they listened to you and your issues, they shared about themselves. I had a longer period of time with them, and I left there wanting to join the army and do something positive with my life. Even though whilst I was there, I was groomed by some of the other children there. Well, one in particular, he was part of a gang in Southampton. They had prostitutes and they wanted to groom me to be a pimp, which I found really difficult because even though I didn't get on brilliantly with my sisters, I couldn't see myself doing that to other women. But so even having that negative influence because of the time these men and women had to spend with me, it made me feel, do you know what, I don't want to do that. And so they were a positive influence. And it just goes to show that living with other criminals that were my age, I was 13 when they tried to make me a pimp. I was smoking cannabis. The boy who was grooming me was 14. He had already experienced a lot of these things. He smoked a lot of cannabis, he had sexual experiences, he was very clued up and streetwise. If I was with other kids that were just as vulnerable as me, perhaps I wouldn't have been groomed in this way. And I think that's what needs to happen, is there needs to be a separation of these types of criminals with vulnerable ones. And you see this in some of the proofs. A young person who's managed to move from a school to a PRU, he may not have some of the serious issues some of the other students at the PRU have. And by mixing with them, he then becomes influenced by them. And his behaviour at the end of it is 10 times worse. So it's quite clear from my personal experience that there needs to be a change in how we manage these types of schools, manage our prisons and these children's homes, that we assess the young people in this way and think, right, we won't put them with these kids because of the group dynamics.